everybody. We're live again. I'm your host Zach from Geeks Can't. I'm joined with my co-host, the Dwarven DM, John Christian, also from Geeks Can't.
Hello, everybody.
And then let's see, we could do a whole bunch of introductions here, but maybe we'll just save them for the podcast. But we've got Marie and Marco with us here as well. We're going to do a little bit different format today. So if you remember Sunday, basically we were just live from 4 o'clock to 11, some nonsense. Today we've spaced things out a little bit more manageable. So we're going to do this episode with Marco. And then we're going to have a break and let you guys go do other stuff for about an hour. And then we'll come back on and do a couple more. Then we'll disappear. Then we'll come back on and do a couple more. And then finish it out. So much more laid back, even though I think we're still doing like 6 or 7. So, all right. Well, let's get into this. I would ask if we're recording, but that's my job today, and so I know
Zach's
we're
wearing
not.
all of the hats
That's right.
today.
That's right. All right. The recording button has been depressed, so we're good to go. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to Geeks Can't, the home of RPG topics and general tomfoolery. I'm your host, Zach, joined as I'm always joined by my co-host, John Christian.
Hello, everybody.
And then I'm also joined by a special guest host, Marie from Blank Scenario.
Hello.
And then we've got a creator for you today, Marco. You probably recall Marco if you were watching the show last Sunday, but he's back with another project.
Hello.
All right. So, Marco, before we get into you, I want to go ahead. This is the first time that Marie has been on the Geeks Can't podcast or the Bite Size Gaming podcast or whatever it is. We thought it'd be cool. She has a cool podcast that she does with her crew. We thought it would be cool if we got her on to do a little guest slot. And Marie, tell us a little bit about Blank Scenario.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm Marie. I am the host and producer, co-producer, whatever fancy term I can put to it for Blank Scenario. Me and my friends basically sit down, someone brings inspiration, a meme, a tweet, a photo that we saw on Facebook, and we use it to create a scenario by the end of it. Typically, we end up with 4 different tangents that we didn't expect. It's always interesting who comes up with what, but yeah, we just create D&D scenarios.
That seems very on brand. Going off tangent is very on brand for this podcast. So
Where we're going, we don't need rails.
that's right.
Yeah.
Now, John, I will ask you to make sure you're muted on Discord because I think you're echoing a bit. There you go. Perfect. Awesome. All right. With that, thank you so much, Marie. We'll get you involved in this conversation as we move along. But Marco, we're here to talk about your. Is it fair to say your no project is ever truly solo, but your solo project today?
It's kind of close. So there's a little bit of history, I guess. So my brother and I have been in business together for almost a decade.
Okay.
And throughout that time, our main project was a lounge in Omaha, Nebraska, and we both just moved from there.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a little handover to a customer, and since then we are kind of like split in responsibilities. But Spicy Tuna is like one of the things that we would love to do. I've always created. I went to school for studio art. Not that I'm good at it because I took 8 years off after that, and so I do most of the writing and like layout for the project, and then we have 2 artists that did all the art,
Mm-hmm.
and then Seven's like the editor. So I can never really say it's a solo project,
Yep.
but it is like Spicy Tuna's second project. The first one was really crazy, happened really quickly, and then this one's the first time that we've actually been at it for like 6 months before doing a Kickstarter. So
Nice. Now, help me. Let's do this as we start off here. You said a lot of things there that are interesting. Spicy Tuna RPG sounds cool. You said you've done another project before, which I'm always interested in seeing, like what your first project was. And then you said you're both an artist and a creator on that. So, geez, I don't know where to start. Let's see. Let's just start with what was that project that you did before Knights of Lazarus? That and tell me a little bit about what people might have expected from that.
Yeah, for sure. So our first project was called Constant Downpour. It's based on a short story by Ray Bradbury called The Long Rain, which
Hmm.
features these military members that were sent to Venus. They are constantly being pounded with rain, and they go one by one insane throughout the whole process, not knowing why they're actually sent uh, to Venus. And their whole goal is to find like a sun dome,
Hmm.
which is to protect them from everything. But for some reason, a lot of ships who end up there crash
Hmm.
or don't end up where they're supposed to. So there's this whole mystery behind that. So it was this giant like psychological thriller. I mean, it was a 48-page system neutral book that we created.
Ooh.
But that is what the process was, and so I actually discovered Mothership during that process. So our next project will be a remastered version, statted for Mothership.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, we did that last Inquest. So
Right on. Right on. Awesome. So let's get into Knights of Lazarus. So you just talked about a sci-fi project. This looks like that unhealthy blend of sci-fi and fantasy is what I'm seeing. What's the elevator pitch for Knights of Lazarus then?
that's a good question. I meant to come up with one. I think what I always call it is it's a dangerous dungeon. So, uh, the ship Canterbury is this floating space station that houses all of these xenotech artifacts, and so players will discover that is a thing and an opportunity to steal these artifacts that have these like really they're like kind of pros and cons. They relieve stress, which is, if you're familiar with Mothership, extremely helpful.
Hmm.
But then they have negative effects that can happen to you if you use it too often. Um, and so, but yeah, I mean, I guess the elevator pitch is this: it's a dangerous dungeon for Mothership. It infuses a few classic fantasy tropes into our beloved sci-fi horror.
Interesting.
I,
Now,
I always find it fascinating seeing how people will bridge the gap between the like fantasy elements and sci-fi elements. You saw Lucas do it with lightsabers and like this very Akira Kurosawa Seven Samurai with the Jedi and stuff like that. So let me ask you this before Zach moves on:
Sure.
how does that hybrid form in this? Like, what would you say is the symbiosis between the sci-fi elements and how you were able to justify almost like the whimsy of the fantasy elements sometimes, right? It's like you're
Yeah.
not, it's not necessarily that it's going to be it doesn't have to make sense, right? It looks cool sometimes, maybe that's it, but you tell me, where does that bridge happen?
So I'll start by saying I try to be very subtle with it, because the last thing I want, well, there's a reason why people play Mothership instead of, Knave or, old school essentials. Um, if you want your fantasy experience, you go get your fantasy experience. So I try to be very subtle with it. Uh, the few that I would say, so there's an automated enemy. Knight effigies, if anybody's familiar, is basically a knight statue on a tomb. And so what I did, I turned that into what would be called autonoma in old school games. I was really inspired by, I don't know the title, but I think Rat King Productions has a Bastion, just a small 6-page dungeon with like really deadly war autonoma. So they're pretty
hmm,
similar, except for they're very slow. You know, the other part is a dungeon. Obviously, we had gradient descent from the TKG crew, but there's not a lot of dungeons in there. And I thought it would be really interesting to kind of put most of the adventure within 50-room dungeon, this kind of larger dungeon, and then like the classic dungeon rules with encounter tables, reaction tables, etc. And so I would say those are kind of the main elements. And then obviously it's a medieval theme, so we have knights and classic kind of fantasy like style cathedral and things like that are infused with medieval themes. So it's not a huge hybrid per se. It's just here's a little nod to it, and here's a little nod, and yeah, let's just like sci-fi it up, just all across the board.
You can see it in the aesthetic that you chose, right? In the artwork that you put in the preview for it. You've got a lot of like this big armor in there. The architectural is very it's like a like space gothic, right? It's very cathedral-esque, really big, open spaces on a starship or on a streamlined stuff that you may be used to with some modern sci-fi and stuff like that. So it has like this. There's an anachronistic quality or an aspect to it that I really really like, and that the armor is actually brilliant. You're using there's swords and bows and things like that. It's not just blaster rifles and plasma grenades that you're using. That's cool. I like it.
I appreciate that. Our artists, they killed it. Our character artist is actually a childhood friend of ours who always wanted to be a concept artist and was one of them that actually became a concept artist. He's working for Once Lost Games, which is ran by a couple of the guys who were in charge of Elder Scrolls 2. And so he really killed it. I don't know what to say. I'm so grateful for our artists, honestly. It's just they did it.
That looks great.
Marie, are you a I know a lot like the episodes that I've listened to of Blank Scenario are very fantasy oriented. Are you tried and true fantasy and avoid the sci-fi angle, or where do you fit in all this?
I am very much the best of both worlds. I love a good sci-fi story as much as fantasy. My husband is not a fantasy buff, so anything non-fantasy we can get into, he goes for. So, like, we have the Alien RPG that he's wanting to run at some point. We use Monster of the Week a lot for our other podcasts that we do. And, of course, any, like, mad scientist role I can get into where I can just do nonsensical stuff that shouldn't work but does, I lean towards. So, like, the is it Motherboard? Am I saying the system right?
Yeah, Mothership.
Mothership, sorry. That one is still a new system to me. I get the general concept, but hearing your description, Marco, I was like, okay, if I can figure out how to take a dungeon crawl, put it in space, and say steal something techie and sci-fi but medieval looking, I have players that I can do that with, and they will have way too much fun with it. So it's definitely just your description of go and steal something that might or might not be bad. It's like immediately I'm sold.
Oh, I'm glad.
Is there anything that you've done, Marco? Like some of this reminds me of I see in chat people are saying Warhammer 40K and things like that. Another thing that I feel like there's elements of is the Destiny franchise, right? And that hardcore blend of at least fantasy language in a sci-fi universe. Is there anything regarding the Mothership system though that you fantasyified, for lack of a real word, or is it very much like no, the crossbows and the swords and all of that is very much of the traditional or 1E Mothership system, and we didn't make any exceptions for the fact that we were doing fantasy items?
I'm trying to think. I definitely don't dabble too much in rules.
Mhm.
I try to be self-aware that that's not a strong point of mine. um, uh, besides, like maybe like some of like the tables that happen. So, with one of the artifacts, the Black Knight's effigy, it's like an actual effigy that you wear, and there's like an anger progression with it. And so I have like a table like that, but otherwise I try not to bend any rules. My standpoint on it is, the guys at TKG, or if I'm playing Knave, Ben, they're making way better rules than I am, so I don't really need to change it. So I don't think I've bended anything too much of that. If anything, I think one thing that sets Mothership apart is like the stress mechanic, and their rules for how weapons like crit are really interesting and very clear. And so that's what I try to do. So there's a few things that are true across the board in Knights of Lazarus. The first one is like sonic weapons. So they use a lot of like giant sound cannons. Uh, and so I try to take like things that are like kind of real today, but like amplify them.
Mhm.
And so with the sound mechanics, it's like very debilitating. If you're hit with like a sound weapon, it can like really like curdle your stomach and like really like mess you up. And so like you have like hearing loss, and you have kind of loss of turns, or disadvantage at body saves, things like that. And then the other thing that's true is um, there is a medicine right now. It's fairly new. It's called transcranial magnetic um, TMS. Stimulation. And so it's used to treat depression. And basically, they use magnets to send signals to your prefrontal cortex to help with your mood control. And so that's what 3 of the 4 Xenotech artifacts are based off of. And so the idea is that there are thousands of parallel thinking civilizations that just so happen to study and produce like medieval philosophies on their planets. And so they have all created these artifacts, and some of them were more advanced at the time. So there's these technological artifacts that are, like crowns or the effigies, and they use TMS technology, but they weren't made for humans. So, so although it's a very safe procedure and a very safe science now, if you're using something that was made for a different species, then you can have like increased stress, or it can do the opposite. Or the night effigy, for instance, that's why there's an anger table, is because it was created with the warring civilization. So their prince had a good head on them, but in battle they wanted him to go berserk, and so they did that. And so if you wear it, similar things can happen.
That's awesome.
So
something I noticed in it too, in the work in progress that you put online. I think it was, you said it was today. You posted this today, right? The 11-page preview, right?
21, yeah.
Yeah. 21. Thank you. One of the things that I noticed that was really interesting is that it's, what is it? Players will most likely fail during their first expedition through the ship Canterbury. Why? So no, there's nothing wrong with it. It's like,
right.
It's fascinating. Like you're putting it right out there for the person that's most likely running it, that there's a high probability they're not going to make it through the first time. Are you expecting replayability to account for that, or is it like an OSR feel where, look, death is a reality even in fantasy?
A little bit of both. Yeah. Sorry, I feel like I keep going on like slight tangents. So
that's good.
Spicy Tuna as a whole, what we're trying to do is make this something that has longevity. And by one of the ways we're doing that is creating a modular universe. And so Knights of Lazarus is one book. And then a book that will be published with that is called Familiar Faces Volume 1. And it's 6 NPCs with necessary professions for the future. They both have optional tie-ins. So if you buy Knights of Lazarus, you won't even know that it's tying into Familiar Faces. But if you have Familiar Faces, you'll realize some of the connections there. Likewise, Familiar Faces is kind of like the glue of the modular universe, where a lot of these NPCs, they're making, there's a Xenotech restorator, there's a coin collector. So it ties directly in. And then there's also people who develop like these mobile suits. And so there's one guy that actually makes the mobile suits for the Knights of Lazarus. So there's these like tie-ins. And so the book can be used as a one-shot. There's different rules for that. It can also be used for, within a campaign. And I think it was developed for that sense. Is like, okay, so you either just started a campaign or you have one going. It's like, how does this tie in? And so you drop, I think we're going to write 20 or like 26 different rumors for it. You can just like filter in different rumors.
Cool.
Another classic fantasy trope. And so the idea is that, it's like really heavily guarded. And so you can get in and get around it. But really, to the OSR take, it's more intelligent to run away than it is to engage in combat. And so the dungeons are made so there's like plenty of ways to go. You can also get around the autonoma depending on how you understand where they are, because they all have stations where they're at, which makes it more difficult. And then each enemy is like specialized, so a lot of them are like you have to have frag grenades or some type of like explosive to be able to get through them, because they either have like a
That's
giant mobile
cool.
suit, or it's this like steel cast autonoma. So you might go in at one point and kind of have your classic loadouts, and it's just not going to be enough. You might get past a few engagements, but in reality is like you just don't have enough grenades or something. So that's kind of the thought behind not surviving, but there's
So
definitely
leaving a
some
wake
things
of bodies for the next group to come through. Is that what it sounds like? This sounds like the opening of Alien. Is what it sounds like to me. It's like the last poor schlubs that dealt with a xenomorph. They're the ones that come in, and now it's their turn to get it.
Right.
I like
Uh,
I like the idea too that like it's really good dungeon design to make your encounters not just encounters but have elements of puzzle to them, right? And so having a creature to where like it's an extremely difficult fight if you don't have X, but if you have X, that's the puzzle piece to quote unquote getting around this as intended, right? Um, that's always nice. I mean, you know, it just not it's good to have variety. It's good to shake things up, and it really gives that opportunity for players and characters who have specialized in particular things, right? Like if you have an explosives expert, he's gonna feel like a badass person if he's got a bandolier of grenades, and grenades are just the thing that's needed for this encounter, right?
It's a very dramatic moment too.
Yeah.
We need grenades. Who has grenades? Look down. You've got the bandolier full of them. You know that kind of that dungeon design philosophy feels a little bit. I don't know if it was like as an old school like a retro gamer, it feels like Mega Man, right? Mega Man or like a Legend of Zelda, where just the right tool for the job, and maybe somewhere inside of the dungeon somewhere you find the thing, and that's the thing that unlocks the next portion of the dungeon, or like a Metroidvania, right? This door is locked
right.
unless you can use super missiles or some kind of a plasma grenade or something like that too. I personally love that kind of design because it makes the dungeon like I don't mind hitting a brick wall when I get to a dungeon and being like, why am I here and what am I supposed to do next? Right. I like that.
Marco, so is the idea with the dungeon crawl aspect of this that your players start off at the gate, or they can be able to collect information beforehand? Because you mentioned there are several rumors that you're going to present with the book, and I can almost see, presenting 3 rumors and my players going, okay, so it sounds like we need X, Y, and Z before we go in. Let's go shopping, and then we'll take that with us. Or is the idea they're going in blind?
Right. The idea. So the space station itself, the ship Canterbury, that's the dungeon. Um, it's kind of traveling. It's not really orbiting something. It's controlled. So it's I guess more of a ship. It's just large enough to be a station. Um, so yeah, the idea is that you don't really start there. You also have to kind of figure out, how you're actually going to make it there, where it is. And so that's kind of intertwined with the Knights of Lazarus are like front facing. Most people believe they're really good people, and they like help with all types of things. They help with like disparate nations. They help meet with mediation between countries, and then they're like deep dark secrets are that they really care more about these tech artifacts. And so they find out you have them, they ask for them, and if you don't give them to them, they'll send in a squadron and just like decimate your entire civilization, because they're usually on the outskirts of wherever, and they take your stuff, but they don't leave survivors, so no one knows that they're these like buttholes, so you might start out in like a nation that's being helped, or even in like a space station where they're there mediating, or where they're maybe you might even be uh, during some like transport process that they're helping protect from like space pirates or things like that. There's like many ways to interact with the actual faction, which is also why I would really like it to be at a lot of tables to be just a recurring thing where this faction's like really strong and you can learn about them. There's also rules to join them, so you can start a campaign within the Knights of Lazarus and then find out the secrets from there, things like that.
That's another thing that I noticed that you have in the preview is like when as discussing how to use the module. You go beyond here's just the story and here's how the story unfolds. You talk specifically about how to start the campaign and how to use it as either a one shot or as an ongoing part of an ongoing campaign. Here's where you can plug it into an existing thing if you want to like make it modular. Don't worry about these two dovetails on either end of it. Just focus on this one thing. I like that. I think it's smart, not necessarily from like a system design perspective, but just from a presenting it the product to the people that are going to run it and the players to know what they can get out of it and get more. They can get more mileage out of it because they can run portions of this and then save other bits and pieces for other parts of the campaign if they want to run them later, right? With some of the other products that you're already putting out or some of the stuff that's at their table and running things like if they're running Mothership elsewhere.
Yeah.
Did you? Who was that? Your idea? Who came up with that golden nugget?
I mean, that's something that main TKG Mothership modules all have, and so and it's really popular in the third party space as well. So I didn't come up with it. I just stole like an artist or whatever. Just like like I love this because I usually am only able to play one shots. I don't get to play a lot just because I have some kids and I just moved. But if I do, it's usually like a one shot, and so I want those rules, but also ideally it's like they can be part of something bigger too, and you can sprinkle in with a bunch of one shots. You can hear these rumors and then end up with a one shot that ends up with the Knights of Lazarus in some way, just because a little bit of metagaming can go a little way.
That's awesome. Before we're getting close to time here, Marie, did you have any other questions for Marco before we close out?
Do you have I think I set it on Kickstarter to notify me on launch. Do you have a date yet for that, or is it coming?
Yeah, we're gonna launch February 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, this is absolutely one of those projects that, I think this is the type of project that crowdfunding and Kickstarter are made for, and it's exactly the type of project that I really like to back. It's really heartening to me to hear, that this is a passion project for you, that you're putting it out under your own label, kind of, working alongside your brother, and that you've got your bud working on the concept, like the art for it, like all that's cool. Like I love that there's like we talked to you on Sunday, and I felt the same way then. Like there's a sense of camaraderie, and that's really fun. It doesn't feel like it was made in a bubble or made, um, in some cold office space somewhere. It has heart, and you can feel that heart. And the art is awesome. The presentation's awesome. I really like this preview that you put together. I'm really excited about backing it on the 1st. So
Thank you guys. I really appreciate that.
Yep, finger is poised over the button as we
there you go.
just give me a chance, man. Just put me in, coach.
That's right.
No, let me echo Zach's sentiment on that too, and let me say this too: the preview that you put out there, that I think that I hope that it shows the level of confidence that you have in your own work. It's like here's 21 pages. You will want the rest of the pages that are not on here. I'm going to give you really, really great stuff, but there's more to come. And I think that speaks a lot to how you feel personally about the project. And I think it's brave and it's bold, and I like it. So kudos to you. I'm glad that you had it out there. I'm glad that I was able to look at it because that just got me more excited about the project. So good on you.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's kind of in our ethos too. We release like 16 free pages of content every month or so. The familiar faces, the first 3 NPCs are free on itch right now. Yucatan Tech Co, which is going to become Incorporated Volume 1. There's like 4 free retro sci-fi weapons, and just kind of that's what I put at the top of the itch page. Is like feel free to like just steal this into your home games for now. Like if this is all you do, that's all you do, and we'll do community copies too, obviously. But yeah, I want my stories to be shared. So one of the easiest ways to do that is have a free version. So
Heck yeah. Well, thank you again, Marco. We're going to point everybody your direction. The follow page on Kickstarter is already live. I'd encourage you to do that. And then go over to spicytunarpg.itch.io and check out all the cool stuff they've already got available there, including that preview. Thank you so much, Marco, and thanks, Marie.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it.